In a dark world filled with deceit, one united voice is crying out. Revealing the truth of God's Word. It's time to expose the hidden truth and unravel the lies. While we're living beyond Satan's little season. With Sister Crystal and Brother Phil.
Welcome to Living in Satan's Little Season show. We're your hosts,
Sister Crystal,
Brother Phil. Topic today, know your enemy, Satan. In this topic, we're going to go over the idea of, let's look to see at the strategies and tactics used that the enemy has been using against us all along from the Bible. Now, we know we're not under Satan's tutelage anymore, at least the devil's tutelage, because, but we're using the same, I think, playbook is what he did.
it's the same rules, different character playing the role.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the satanic forces are using the same ideas, the same strategies that the devil originally was used all the way along. And that's why we're going to study the devil and how he did everything in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. And then we're going to see, this is pretty much what's been going on today. Right. And we're going to try to compare the two.
Nothing new under the sun. That's what the Bible says. But basically, he's a master liar, master manipulator, master deceiver, and he's inside the church. He's outside. He's all over the place. He's trying to take as many people basically out through their faith to get them either giving up, struggling, letting it all go. He doesn't want anyone to endure and to overcome, but we're here to encourage you to do so.
The question I've been getting a lot is that, if Satan's gone now, or at least the devil is, why is there so much evil in the world and whatnot? And that's a really good question, and I've answered it a couple times in some of my earlier shows, but I want to answer a little more detail now, because what you do is, if you read back in Genesis chapter 2, okay, and we're going to go back to there, because God explains something a little bit I think is kind of interesting. If you go to the Garden of Eden, verse 16, chapter 2, he says, the Lord gave a charge to Adam, saying, of every tree is in the garden you may eat, but the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat of it, for the day you eat of it, to death you will die. This is pretty much what he stated, okay? So the point is see, there's this tree, there's two trees in the garden by name. The one is the tree of life, and we know what that did, right?
Right.
What happened if you ate of the tree of life?
You'd live forever.
Yes, you would live forever. So the idea with the tree of life is, that's a good one. We want to live forever. We want to have life. So this is a good tree. But the second tree, the tree of, I want you to see what it's saying there, the knowledge of good and evil. Well, you see, what did that give us? Okay, Remember, the tree of life gave us life. The tree of knowledge of good and evil, gave us the knowledge of good and, unfortunately, evil as well.
Right.
So this is what happened. Human beings, when they ate of that tree, which Adam and Eve did eat that tree,
right,
they and everybody else after them got the knowledge of good and evil. So we really don't need satanic forces really anymore to guide or direct our paths anymore. We already have partaken of and understand evil, and of course human beings have no problem inventing new ways to do evil now.
That has always interested me. They were the two that ate it. She of course was deceived and then handed it to him, but their kids didn't eat it because they were kicked out of the garden before they even had kids. But how did the rest of mankind get that? It was because of them.
Yep.
That broke that seal, so to speak, and let out the worms.
They opened Pandora's box when it came to the knowledge of good and evil. Mm-hmm. And so all humanity got that knowledge of good and evil. And so this is what's been going on in our world today, that we have we now know what evil is. It's almost like we've invented new ways to do evil.
Oh, yeah. It's just crazy. And it gets even more crazier as time goes on. I do not recall all these crime shows and all these real life crimes that people are figuring out the mystery of them, or figuring out what went place and what took down. And it's this crazy stuff. And it's like, who could invent these crazy scenarios? But that's evil. Evil gives birth to crazy, evil ways.
We're going to start here in Genesis chapter 3, because this is the first real temptation that we get. So we understand, okay, this is how the devil works, how he worked in the past, and these are how satanic forces now work in our present. And we're going to read Genesis chapter 3, verse 2, and start there. Go ahead and read that one.
Why did God tell you that you shouldn't eat from all of the trees in the paradise? And the woman replied to the snake, we can eat the fruit from the trees of paradise, but God said that we shouldn't eat the fruit from the tree in the middle of paradise, that we shouldn't even touch it, or we'll die. Then the snake said to the woman, you won't stop living and die, for God knows that on whatever day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened wide, and you'll be like the gods, knowing good and evil.
Okay, so that's essentially what really happened. I mean, that's what they learned. This is why evil came into the world. They ate that tree, and their eyes were opened. They now knew good and evil, and so now this has been what's been going on ever since.
2 questions. 1, why did God put that tree there? And 2, well, it's not really more of an observation. He wanted her to eat it. Satan, the snake, wanted her to eat it because he wanted to be like a god, and he wanted to make them be like God. So, it's all about taking God out of the picture.
Interestingly enough, we know there's this war in heaven earlier. There is no tree of knowledge of good and evil as far as we know in heaven. How did the wickedness and evil begin or get birth there?
Right.
It's it was a whole different scenario. So I'm not sure how this all worked out. And, of course, they got banished to earth as their punishment. And then, of course, they became our problem after that.
Well, I guess God ultimately, if there are choices for us to make, he doesn't want us to choose the wrong choice. That's what I kind of understood by that. He put it there because he wanted them to trust him to do the right thing and not be tempted to do the wrong thing.
I think God was always looking for people that just wanted to follow him despite the odds, despite, given a real choice.
Yeah.
He doesn't really want people just to follow him because we're forced to or we don't know. Yeah, he wants people to believe and trust in him because we have choices that we could make and we could choose not to.
Right.
And I think he loves it when we choose to follow him despite the fact that we don't really have to. We don't really have to do that.
He loves it when we see our 2 options and we choose the better option. Because remember, even Jesus said to Mary and Martha, to Martha, who was busy doing all these things, he said to Mary, or about Mary, he said, but Mary chose the better part. See, I think ultimately he wants us to see the 2 decisions we have and to choose the better of the 2. And the only one that's really the option, the other one is not the option he wants us to make, so it's not really an option at all. But I think he wants us to want to desire and live for him and grow closer to him. Who doesn't want that as a child or, an adoptive child in a family?
Well, we're going to go to another place in the Bible. This is the next place you hear of what happens with Satan and tempting Job and the Job scenario. And we're going to go over this particular area because this will help us glean some ideas on how the strategies that the devil and the satanic forces of this world, which use the same playbook, even though Satan's gone, they don't worry. He's using his same playbook.
Right.
But before we do that, we want to go into what Satan actually means, because see, I'm calling my show Satan's Little Season, and people have always, I get this all the time, like, yeah, but you say that we're beyond Satan's Little Season now. Well, what people don't realize is Satan is a title.
Right.
It means adversary or opposer to God. And right now, if you haven't looked out your window and looked at the world today, all you see is people that are, the whole society is adversaries and opposers to the living God that we serve. This is a day and age that we live in right now. Right. So essentially even though we're not in the biblical Satan's Little Season right now, we are living in a satanic and an age of Satan, an age of the opposer, that are people are opposing God and God's ways. Right. And you see it all. I mean, if you would have to be blind if you don't see that in our world today. Honestly, that's all I can see. It's like torment. I feel like Lot living in Sodom. when I look out to my society today. Honestly, I do. I just see evil and wickedness and all over the place, and it's because this is what society has turned into now.
It's total saturation
Right.
of evil all around us on every angle. And it is encouraging to find a brother or sister or some other person who's encouraged by the word of God and sharing their testimony and sharing and ministering in the faith. That's encouraging. But it's not as common as I think it might have been or that it should be. Now it's really even scarce to find. And I'm glad that we're doing this and that people are responding, because this is what we all need. We need to know our enemy. We need to know who we are fighting and how God tells us to equip ourselves to be able to endure the battle.
Okay, let's go ahead and go to Job chapter 1, and we're going to study about Job and how the devil, the satanic forces, and you know, there, of course, he's called the devil
Right.
in this passage, but the devil and Satan throughout most of the New Testament are the same being, and we're going to learn about that probably on the next show, but they're the same being, and just the Satan means opposer or adversary, and the devil just means a slanderer.
Right.
Okay. So essentially, in the Old Testament, he primarily was a slanderer, and he slandered God. He slandered and then what happens in the New Testament? He switches gears to becomes more of an opposer because he's opposing Christ.
Well, his
reign.
only real opponent really is Christ.
See, Christ showed up, and then he became primarily known as the opposer because Christ was, of course, King of Kings and Lord of Lords.
Well, he
and
was
Satan
the Son
was
of
trying
God.
to
Yeah, the
overcome
Son
it.
of God and his only real competition.
Well, yeah, that's what, and we'll learn about that here in a few moments, because Satan is used in the Old Testament, but it's mainly used as adversaries against a rightful king, and we're going to study about that here in a moment. But let's go to Job first, and we're going to, of course, he's called the devil here because he's a slanderer. He's slandering God and God's, people. And this is what he's been doing all along. This is the way he tries to get at God. He's saying, your people aren't that great. And this is what he does, putting us down, like that we're not really important, when God is really proud of people that are faithful to him, just like Job was. Go ahead and read, starting with verse 6 in Job chapter 1.
And it came to pass one day that, behold, the sons of God came to stand before the Lord, and the devil came with them. And the Lord said to the devil, from where have you come? And the devil answered the Lord and said, I have come from compassing the earth and walking up and down in the world. And the Lord said to him, have you diligently considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on all the earth, a blameless man, true, godly, abstaining from everything evil?
We learn what God is really thankful for and what he's really... See, one thing we have to do is not only do we have to look at what Satan goes after, but let's look at what God sees as really important.
He was really manly.
Okay, yeah, he was manly, all right. We had that show on manly. Well, that's a good trait to have. But the point is he was looking at certain character traits, God was, and why he was so proud of his servant Job here. And these are the kind of traits that we need to have.
Right.
And this will help us in our attacks that the satanic forces of this world are encompassing on us all the time. Okay? There's none like him on all the earth. Of course, look at him as a blameless. See, that's the problem. We live in a society where hardly anybody's blameless these days.
Right.
It seems like it's hard to find people like this. Blameless, true, godly. In other words, a righteous person, abstaining from everything evil. See, this is what we need to be doing today. If you want God to be proud of you and look at you as being somebody that he is going to, hey, show you off, you need to have these character traits. But it's an unfortunate day and age that we live in, that we rarely find people like this because the satanic forces of this age have watered down our culture to the point where it's rare to find somebody who is like this anymore, that has these character traits that God is really looking for. And I'm just trying to encourage everybody, my listeners here, that we don't want to fall into the traps of the satanic forces of this world, because that's what the devil has done. He has groomed his successors, which are running this world right now like a well-oiled machine,
Right.
to water it down to the point where we don't have anybody And I think, honestly, it kind of sounds like they've done better than the devil. Honestly, the way I see society today is we have accelerated, the satanic forces have accelerated wickedness and evil in our culture.
Well, not only have they accelerated it, but they have infiltrated it through the church.
That's a whole nother thing, you know. And like you say, half my shows are, look at all this stuff that's gone on in the church, and look at all this false doctrine that's crept in, and all this false teaching that's been crept in, and now you have the church is nowhere. It's almost
weak.
like the church is a laughing stock.
Exactly.
It's almost like I'm embarrassed to invite somebody to church because it's so wicked.
Well, it's as if the church has just sat down and just gotten fat and lazy and doesn't care to exercise their spiritual disciplines and their fervor for the Lord, and so they just become complacent, kind of like the churches in Revelation, especially Laodicea, when it was neither hot nor cold but lukewarm. That's really what it seems like.
We just need to just recognize that, hey, we've got some work to do here, folks. The satanic forces have done a really, really good job infiltrating the church. And now we don't have people that have this blameless, true, godly, abstaining from everything evil. Oh, really? This is not very common in our churches today, unfortunately, because our churches are so saturated with all this nonsense from the world that we need to just throw all this out. We need to abstain from all this wickedness that the world is pushing down our throats constantly. And I think that movement is kind of coming around now. I'm really kind of seeing that in the counterculture movement that we're part of here. My listeners are, but I'm just trying to get the word out here. Like, listen, we've got to say no and stop all this mess. Matter of fact, the more I read the Bible, I scratch my head going, the culture that's being taught in the Bible. I could do so many shows on it's. If I described how people are supposed to be according to the Bible, it would be like, it would literally be offensive to most believing Christians. Even though this is what's taught in our Bibles. This is where we've come to now. And I plan on doing some shows on this when it comes to the understanding marriage, understanding courtship, understanding how relationships worked in biblical times, and what God taught about that.
Roles in the marriage relationship.
Roles in the roles of husbands and wives, if you read how the Bible talks about them, most Christians today would be offended by what the Bible actually taught about this particular topic. Right. Because it is so counterculture. See, our culture has gotten in to the church so much, the satanic forces. And I just want us to realize that, because here you have these sons of God coming in front of the Lord. Remember, this is the sons of God. These are what the fallen angels coming with Satan there. So see, Satan talks to God this way. Somehow he in the spiritual realm, they can kind of talk and together. And this is what happened here with Job. Okay, why don't you go ahead and continue on with that story there?
Have you not made a hedge about him, about his household and all his possessions round about? And have you not blessed the works of his hands and multiplied his substance upon the land? But put forth your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. Then the Lord said to the devil, Behold, I give all that he has into your hands, but touch not himself. So the devil went out from the presence of the Lord. And it came to pass on a certain day that Job's sons and his daughters were drinking wine in the house of their elder brother. And behold, there came a messenger to Job, and said to him, The oxen were plowing, and the donkeys were feeding near them. And then the spoilers came and took them for prey, and killed the servants with the sword. I alone have escaped, and have come to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came another messenger, and said to Job, Fire has fallen from heaven, and burned up the sheep, and likewise have devoured the shepherds, and I alone have escaped, and come to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came another messenger, and said to Job, The horsemen formed 3 companies against us, and surrounded the camels, and took them for prey, and killed the servants with the sword, and I alone have escaped, and have come to tell you. While he was yet speaking, another messenger came, and said to Job, While your sons and daughters were eating and drinking with their older brother, suddenly a great wind came from across the desert, and caught the 4 corners of the house, and the house fell upon your children, and they are all dead. I alone have escaped, and come to tell you.
Okay, so now we see what kind of happened. That's how the devil works. A lot of times he'll just bomb you with a bunch of scenarios which is designed to just demoralize you. And this is what he did with Job, Didn't even get a chance to catch his breath from one disaster when the next one showed up. What is the first thing he attacks? The idea of his material wealth. Okay, this is one of the main things he attacked here. There's two primarily. If you study this, it's really kind of interesting. This is kind of what we need to understand how the devil works. He attacks primarily two different things. He attacks our material wealth, which is what a lot of people use as, unfortunately, security these days.
Right.
And so this is why don't trust in the security of wealth. Keep your security in the living God and in Jesus Christ.
Amen.
This is what we need to focus on, because trust me when I say this, the security that this world offers is very fleeting.
Yep.
It could be gone in an instant. You just never know. Never put your faith and your trust in material wealth. And this is what he had. He had a lot of material wealth. So he was kind of buffered a little bit, I know where my next meal's coming from. I have plenty of sheep and oxen, and, I could sell one of those if I run into any trouble. This is kind of what most people think today. It's like, oh, I'm doing pretty well. I have a really good job.
My confidence in the
they
things
put their confidence in either their careers, in their jobs, in whatever, and we just don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Maybe we'll get injured, and then we can't work anymore, or always something could happen. So never just trust in the satanic forces. Don't trust in those, because all these material wealth that people put their faith in all the time, you just don't know if it's going to be there tomorrow.
Well, that's it. A job could be gone tomorrow, and that would mean that you might lose your home because you're mortgaged. You have all these other things, a loan for your car, or then people have medical bills that come up on them and they can't afford anything. And, it's all these things. It's an onslaught from every angle that the devil can attack you. All that we really need to do is go, okay, how do I need to handle this? I need to not put my faith in the things that I can see, but my faith in who I know is in control. And it's not the devil and the enemy. It's God. I can't see him, but I can trust him. And I know that he's going to be there for me. Even if, dare I say, you lose your children. And it's hard when you're there. But and I've been there, but I prayed and I asked God, and he had the answer before I even prayed. And that's beautiful. He is there to help us in any circumstance, any problem we face. We just have to trust him and know that he's going to answer and be our answer for whatever we need him for, if we just have our faith put solely on him.
Well, see, that's why we get into our second thing. Not only does he attack our material wealth, but then, again, what did he attack? He attacked Job's family. Literally, all his children were just wiped out and killed in one day. All 10 of them. See, this is the way things work, okay? And, of course, I don't think any one of us has been through quite a disaster like this. Yes, we've, your hosts here have been through, individual losses, one at a time, through
years apart.
We've had a number of miscarriages that we've gone through. We had stillbirth that we've gone through. We had
financial losses. An
infant die and only 8 hours old. We have had all these things, kind of like what Job had, except for ours were kind of spread out. And this, when we were going through this, I just knew. And this story of Job just came to my mind immediately. Yeah. This is how the satanic forces work. If you are living outside the satanic forces, you're not going along with their ideas and their whims, you will get attacked. Trust me on this. I tell people, I'm like, you listen to our show, and you start living your life according to God's ways and His will and His principles and everything. Things may not always go your way like they did Job.
Or you'll start seeing things kind of unravel, but it's not because God has taken his hand or eyes off of you. It's because the Bible even says we are to endure hardships and trials. And that's important. If he wants to know, are you really his? And he allowed this really to Job to see if Job was going to forsake him or not.
And see, the thing about it is, you look at it, and God allowed the devil to take I want you to think about this. He allowed the devil to take the lives of Job's children. Mm-hmm. And I think he does that even today, too. I mean, the satanic forces are allowed to even take the life, because you know what? We know where those lives are at now, don't we? Mm-hmm. One thing great about our show here is I explain, the Bible tells us exactly where all the people who have died are at right now. See, this is what's great, that we have the hope that they're in a wonderful city being taken care of by the saints right now, and they're in a lot better place than we are.
Right.
They're in the place that we want to get to eventually. When we lose a loved one, we'll get to them eventually. We just have to endure to the end of this life and endure all the hardships and struggles and pain, suffering that the world puts in our way.
You know, one thing I didn't notice until now or recently is that, all these were pirates or, robbers that came, except for fire that came down and destroyed the one. So they had supernatural control over, like, fire that, coming down out of heaven. And then the wind knocking, this great wind came and knocked down the house. I mean, those are like external forces. I mean, I could see the robbers, they could impart evil into these guys, but these are like global things that you wouldn't think, or not global, but like, like
natural
events that you would think they would be able to be in control of.
Yeah, you notice this is how Satan does it. He makes it into a act of God that actually takes out all those children. See, so in other words, his whole point of that is, that wind, God could have prevented that wind from destroying your house. So it's his fault. See, this is what the satanic forces do. What they do, and they love to do this kind of nonsense.
They masquerade.
They want to call these things act of God when it has nothing to do with God at all. God didn't want that or desire that at all. It was the satanic forces that did it. And of course, who gets blamed? Every single time, it's God that gets blamed. This is how the satanic forces a lot of times do anything. They'll use natural means that they've manipulated. This is why this really sickens me, because we know that most of our weather is controlled these days.
Right.
I mean, any weather that you see outside is not natural. It's all been completely manipulated and controlled.
Yeah.
So you see, when there's a disaster like a hurricane, a tornado that comes around, earthquakes, most of these are completely fabricated, and they're not natural. These are satanic forces that are doing all these things. And of course, we've learned recently, forest fires that you think are, that's an act of God. We're learning now, no, these were set by satanic forces. See, this is kind of what's going on now. Everybody wants to blame God for these things when God had really nothing to do with it. It was satanic forces that did it all along.
Right.
See, this is how the devil does things. He wants us to get embittered towards God so that we blame him for all these things that the satanic forces are actually doing.
Exactly.
That they're the ones that are responsible for all this. They're the ones that are controlling all this.
They're orchestrating the evil and the plans and executing all of it, but they're making it look as though God is the one responsible.
See, and this is, we're not going to fall for that one, because we understand how this world works now. Most of our listeners here, they understand that this world isn't as it seems. That there's satanic forces have controlled almost every aspect of this world, including our weather. All these disasters that come about, they aren't natural. They're scheduled. And this is what we've learned in recent years with all these things that have come upon the world today, that, every time I hear of a hurricane or something like that, I just scratch my head and go, well, the satanic force is at work again. That's what I say. This is not God doing this. This is the satanic forces doing this. See, this is why what we need to understand. We are living in a very wicked and evil generation. Right. And this is the way satanic forces work. They want us people to blame God for these events when really God had nothing to do with it. It's the wicked forces of this world have done this thing. So I'm just trying to warn everybody. Okay, let's go ahead and read, finish up here with Job chapter 2 before we close off on this one, because we're going to have to make this into a two-parter here, because we haven't even gotten to the New Testament yet. But let's finish up with Job here, because the Job scenario is very interesting, and we're going to learn a little bit more in Job chapter 2, verse 1. Go ahead.
And it came to pass on a certain day that the sons of God came to stand before the Lord. And the devil came among them and stood before the Lord. And the Lord said to the devil, "From where have you come?" And the devil said, "Before the Lord, I have come from going through the world and walking about the whole earth." And the Lord said to the devil, "Have you then observed my servant Job? Then there is none like him on earth, a harmless, true, blameless, and godly man, abstaining from all evil. And yet he cleaves to innocence, although you have incited me to destroy his substance without cause." And the devil answered and said to the Lord, "Skin for skin. All that a man has, he will give as a ransom for his life. Ah, but put forth your hand and touch his bones and his flesh. Surely he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to the devil, Behold, I deliver him to you. Only save his life.
This is really super interesting. We're learning so much information here, okay? The next thing he attacked, okay, the first two things, of course, was his material wealth. Eliminated that. I'm trying to tell you, don't put your trust in that. And then he attacks who? He attacks his family, okay? His children all killed in one day, okay? And of course, makes it into a natural cause so that, of course, we blame God for all these things, of course. And then the next thing, of course, is it's attacking his health.
Right.
Okay. So a lot of times, for men, they can go like, well, hey, I know that I've suffered some losses, but you know what? I still got my health. I've got something. Okay. So here, of course, you're saying, well, that's because he still has his health. That's the reason why he's still trusting in you. This is another way the devil does everything. When people go through health crises, which most health crises these days, I hate to say it, we don't live in a day and age where I think the satanic forces do it. A lot of times people have done it to themselves in the way they eat and their lifestyles. And that's why we got to be careful that we're not doing things to ourselves by eating all the poisonous food. See, that's what I think the satanic forces now aren't really allowed to really attack physically like Job here. I think what they do is they've just poisoned our food, poisoned our water, poisoned our air, and tried to like slowly destroy our health this way. And so then when our health goes out, when we're living our lives, we start, what's going on here? Why are we have that poor health? And it's because, you're following the satanic forces.
Well, it's also through the broadcasting. I really think the things people watch and see and put their faith in, so to speak, the news, the shows, all these things, it deteriorates you. And probably also from the inside out. Because it goes through your eyes and then it gets in your head and then you start worrying, getting fearful and gets in your heart. And so there's a lot of ways that evil infiltrates our bodies. It can make us sick. It can make our minds going a little fearful and anxious. It can mess with our hearts. It's the whole body. It's not just the physical, but it's everything.
Well, that's true. And so that's why we have to be on guard against all these satanic forces that are out there. We live in a very dark, deceptive age, unfortunately. Okay.
Right.
And we're looking here at this poor guy, Job, living a righteous and holy life. That's why I'm saying, just because you're a righteous and holy person. See, this is why I don't really like a lot of these preachers out there. They're telling you, if you just put your trust and your faith in Christ, that, everything in your life is going to go wonderful. What happened to the apostles? Did their life go wonderful because they put their
John the Baptist.
Yeah, John the Baptist, he put his trust and faith in God, and he ended up losing his head over it.
Exactly.
See, just because you put your trust and faith in God does not mean that everything in your life is going to go perfect. I'm just saying, a lot of times things could go much worse. And the reason for that is because now you're going against culture and society, and of course, then you get targeted. Right. By societal forces. What we're trying to do here in this show is create a movement of we need to all rise up together, all of us, and just oppose the satanic forces of this dark age we live in.
Yes.
It's terrible that the day and age we're living right now. What happens? How do they attack us? Just like the attack of Job.
Right.
Financially, our families, they'll attack our families, and then of course they'll attack our health.
Yep.
Attack every aspect, and so when all those get attacked, you really are down to nothing.
Well, your defenses are weakened, and you start to go, okay, what else is there? But there have been people who have had a lot of those things taken from them, and they still have continued their faith and trust in the Lord.
We live in a society that we put our faith and our trust in a lot of these things that that Job was had got taken away from him. This is why a lot of people either they turn their back on God or they start to compromise their convictions.
Right.
When of course we learned that Job, he never compromised.
No.
He never, even though things weren't going his way.
Well, even had 3 friends that weren't really friendly to him.
And even a wife that
of course
treated him like dirt.
Well, I love Job's response. Yes, she might have said, curse God and die. Okay, I totally get it. She lost her children. Okay, give the lady a little, room there, okay? She was heartbroken. But he answered her in the most wise way possible and said, We take the good from God. Why not the bad as well? Boom.
Well,
He's like, yeah, God is, we know there's been songs written. He takes and gives and takes away. Okay, that's what he can do. But just because he takes away doesn't mean he's mad at us or that he's allowing us, that he's forgotten about us or he's given us over to evil. No, he wants to see what are we going to do about it. How are we going to react to the hardships we endure? Are we going to run away? Are we going to face them and trust him and go boldly to his side and let him protect us?
Next week, we'll go over a little bit more on this topic here of know your enemy, Satan, because we're living in a very dark and deceptive age. We must be vigilant. We must be manly. We must be fortified, standing firm in the faith, doing everything in love, not only because it's biblical,
but because it glorifies God.
Join or contact us at satanslowseason.org. This is a non-copyrighted Living in Satan's Low Season production.